Women were drawn to him like snow on a winter morning. Men wanted to be like him, and everything about him was just attractive and masculine. Sometimes you just couldn't quite put a finger on it. Well, most of his fine qualities weren't as complicated as you might think. Others, you just had to be born with it. Rugged handsomeness. He wasn't just good-looking. He was the definition of classic masculinity. Picture this: a square jaw that looked like it was carved out of granite, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a smile so devilishly charming it could melt anyone's defenses. He wasn't just a handsome face. He was the total package of strength, confidence, and charisma. What set Gable apart from many leading men of his time was how different his look was. Back then, a lot of Hollywood's heartthrobs had a more polished, almost boyish charm, soft features, dapper appearances, and a touch of sweetness. But Gable, he had an edge. He looked like the guy who could chop firewood, fix a car, and then sweep you off your feet all in one afternoon. His physicality screamed, "man's man," and that rugged appeal made him stand out in an industry often obsessed with perfection. His iconic roles brought that masculinity to life. Take Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. As Rhett, Gable wasn't just a romantic lead. He was fiery, commanding, and unapologetically confident. Every time he appeared on screen, his presence was magnetic, and women couldn't help but be drawn to him. Then there's It Happened One Night, where he played Peter Warne, a sharp-tongued, quick-witted newspaper reporter. His charm wasn't just in his looks, but also in the way he carried himself, casual yet commanding, confident but never arrogant. Even in simple scenes, like when he teased Claudette Colbert's character or flirted with her effortlessly, his natural magnetism was on full display. And let's not forget that Gable's look wasn't just about his physical features. It was also about how he presented himself. He carried a ruggedness that didn't feel forced or artificial. It was authentic, making women want to be around him and men aspire to be like him. When we think about modern-day leading men, some come close to embodying that rugged charisma. Think Chris Hemsworth or Hugh Jackman. But even they owe a nod to Gable, who set the standard for what it means to be both handsome and masculine in Hollywood. Clark Gable wasn't just another pretty face in a tailored suit. He was the epitome of old-school Hollywood allure, a man whose rugged handsomeness remains timeless. He was a good bad boy. The ladies would attest to the fact that Clark had an irresistible bad boy edge that made him even more alluring. He wasn't the clean-cut, always perfect hero Hollywood sometimes churned out. Instead, he had a streak of rebellion and danger, the kind that makes women think, "I can change him," while secretly hoping he stays just wild enough to keep things exciting. Gable had a rough start in life. He came from a humble background, working blue-collar jobs before breaking into acting. That tough, self-made energy followed him throughout his career. He wasn't polished or pretentious. He was real. Women loved that about him. He had this aura of independence, a man who played by his own rules but still had a soft side buried under that tough exterior. And let's be honest, Gable wasn't a saint. He had a reputation for being a bit of a playboy, which somehow added to his allure. Stories of his romances and flings swirled around Hollywood, making him both a scandalous and irresistible figure. But even with his rebellious streak, he wasn't unkind or cruel. Gable had a charm that made his bad boy antics seem more like a mischievous streak than anything truly villainous. What really won women over, though, was that he wasn't just the bad boy. Beneath that rugged, untamed surface was a man with a heart. He was famously generous and thoughtful off camera. Crew members and co-stars often spoke about how he treated everyone with respect, from big-name actresses to the grips and set decorators. Take, for instance, his relationship with Carole Lombard, the love of his life. Their romance was the stuff of Hollywood legend, but what really stood out was how devoted he was to her. After her tragic death, Gable was devastated, and his grief made him even more human in the eyes of his fans. Women adored him not just because he was charming and rebellious, but because he had depth, a man who felt deeply and loved fiercely. His film roles often mirrored this duality. As Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, he was a scoundrel with a soft spot. Sure, Rhett was cocky, a bit of a troublemaker, and knew how to push Scarlett's buttons, but he also loved her with a passion that couldn't be denied. That complexity, being both wild and tender, made his characters unforgettable and his real-life persona irresistible. Clark Gable was proof that a little bad boy energy, when paired with kindness and vulnerability, could turn into something magical. He wasn't perfect, and that's exactly why women loved him. Undeniable charm and charisma. He had a confidence that could light up a room and make everyone stop and take notice. It wasn't the kind of confidence that comes from arrogance or showing off. No, his charm was effortless, like he didn't need to try because he just knew he had it. Women adored him for that. There was something magnetic about how Gable carried himself. He stood tall, spoke with a calm authority, and always seemed to be in control of every situation, whether on or off screen. He had a way of looking at people, direct and unflinching, that made them feel seen, like they were the only ones who mattered. That's a rare quality, and it drove women wild. In his movies, Gable's charisma practically jumped off the screen. Take It Happened One Night. There's a famous scene where his character, Peter Warren, teaches Claudette Colbert's character about hitchhiking. He delivers his lines with so much confidence and charm that even a simple topic like sticking your thumb out becomes captivating. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it, with a glint in his eye and a knowing smirk that hinted he always had the upper hand. But Gable's confidence wasn't about being loud or dominating. He had a cool, laid-back style that made him approachable. He never seemed to be trying too hard, and that relaxed attitude made people feel comfortable around him. You could see it in how his female co-stars reacted to him on screen. There was always a natural chemistry because he made them feel at ease. And then there's Gone with the Wind. Rhett Butler was the ultimate display of Gable's confidence. Rhett was cocky, yes, but he was also smooth and self-assured in a way that wasn't overbearing. When he told Scarlett, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," it wasn't just the words. It was the way Gable delivered them with such cool detachment that made the line iconic. Off-screen, Gable's confidence shone in how he dealt with the pressures of fame and the politics of Hollywood. He didn't let the fame change him. Despite his success, he remained grounded, which only made people respect him more. Women loved that he was confident but not egotistical. He could charm you without making it all about him. He had a commanding voice. Clark Gable's voice was one of his most memorable traits, a deep, smooth, and commanding baritone that could make even the simplest words sound important. Women didn't just love to look at him, they could listen to him for hours. His voice had a way of drawing you in, like he was letting you in on a secret or giving you his undivided attention. Unlike some actors of his time, Gable didn't have the clipped, overly polished tones that were common in old Hollywood. His voice was natural, rugged, and full of character. It carried weight, like the voice of someone who had lived a real life and knew what he was talking about. That authenticity made him incredibly appealing. On screen, Gable's voice added an extra layer to his characters. Take Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. The way he spoke to Scarlett, calm, confident, and just a little bit teasing, was enough to make audiences melt. When he said lines like, "You should be kissed, and often, and by someone who knows how," it wasn't just the words that did it, it was how he said them. Low, steady, and full of passion. Even in lighter roles, like Peter Warren in It Happened One Night, his voice played a key part in his charm. When he bantered with Claudette Colbert's character, his delivery was playful, but never silly. He always sounded like the smartest guy in the room, but he didn't rub it in your face. Off-screen, Gable's voice had the same effect. He could captivate a room just by speaking. His laughter was hearty and genuine, and when he told a story, people couldn't help but lean in and listen. Co-stars and friends often said that his voice was as much a part of his appeal as his looks. And it wasn't just the sound of his voice, it was how he used it. Gable knew when to raise it, when to soften it, and when to pause for effect. That natural rhythm made everything he said feel important, even if it was just small talk. In a world where many stars were molded to sound alike, Clark Gable's voice stood out. It wasn't perfect, but that's what made it so captivating. It was real, rich, and full of personality, just like the man himself. He was funny. Not many people had Gable's sense of humor. It was the kind that could disarm even the most skeptical hearts. He didn't just look good and sound good, he could make you laugh, and that's often the way to truly win people over. Women loved his sharp wit and playful charm, which added a layer of relatability to his larger-than-life persona. Gable had a knack for delivering one-liners with impeccable timing. Whether it was a sly remark, a teasing jab, or a self-deprecating quip, he always knew how to lighten the mood. In It Happened, one night, his humor took center stage. As Peter Warren, he delivered lines like, "I'll have you know I'm a pretty good judge of character," almost as good as a character of Judges. His playful banter with Claudette Colbert created a dynamic that felt real and electric, and audiences couldn't get enough of it. What made Gable's humor so appealing was that it wasn't mean-spirited or over the top. He had a way of poking fun without being hurtful, making people laugh while still keeping things light and easy. This warmth and playfulness translated off-screen, too. Co-stars often described him as someone who didn't take himself too seriously, even at the height of his fame. His humor was also a tool he used to put people at ease. If someone was nervous around him, a common occurrence considering his superstar status, he'd crack a joke or make a funny observation to break the tension. It was this approachable, down-to-earth quality that endeared him to women everywhere. Gable's humor wasn't just verbal, it was physical too. He had a way of using his body language and expressions to add to the comedic effect. In It Happened One Night, his famous Walls of Jericho scene, where he teased Colbert's character while hanging a blanket between their beds, was a perfect example of how he could mix charm and humor effortlessly.
Behold the walls of Jericho.
Even in more serious roles, Gable managed to sneak in moments of levity that made his characters feel more human. As Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, his smirks and teasing comments to Scarlett O'Hara added a lightness to an otherwise dramatic story. It showed that even in the face of chaos, his characters, and by extension Gable himself, could find a reason to smile. His humor wasn't forced or overly polished. It felt genuine, like something he'd come up with on the spot. That authenticity made him even more appealing. It wasn't just that Clark Gable could make you laugh, it was that his humor came from a place of confidence, charm, and kindness, and that combination was simply irresistible. He was masculine. Exuded masculinity in a way that felt effortless and authentic. He wasn't the type to pose or overdo it. His rugged appeal came naturally, and that's what made him stand out. In a time when some leading men had a polished, almost delicate quality, Gable brought raw, unfiltered masculinity to the screen. Physically, he embodied what many women dreamed of. Broad shoulders, a strong jawline, and a commanding presence. But it wasn't just about his looks. It was the way he moved, stood, and carried himself. Gable's body language was confident and powerful without being aggressive. He could make leaning against a wall or lighting a cigarette look impossibly cool. In roles like Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, Gable's masculinity was undeniable. He played Rhett as a man who wasn't afraid to take charge, speak his mind, or go after what he wanted, whether it was business success, survival in the Civil War, or the love of Scarlett O'Hara. But Rhett wasn't just tough. He had depth, vulnerability, and a sense of honor, which made him all the more appealing. Off-screen, Gable's masculinity came through in how he lived his life. He loved outdoor activities like hunting and fishing, and he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He was the kind of man who'd rather be out in the wild than sitting in a fancy Hollywood mansion. This grounded, down-to-earth nature added to his charm, making him feel real and relatable. But what truly set Gable apart was how he balanced his masculinity with warmth and sensitivity. He wasn't the kind of man who needed to dominate every situation. Instead, he used his strength to protect, support, and uplift others. Women loved that he could be tough without being cruel, strong without being overbearing. Even his imperfections made him more masculine in the eyes of many. His famously large ears, for example, didn't diminish his appeal. Instead, they made him look more unique and approachable. Gable's brand of masculinity wasn't about being perfect, it was about being real. Clark Gable set the standard for masculinity in his era and beyond. He wasn't just a man who looked the part of a leading man, he felt it, inside and out. Women loved him because he embodied strength, confidence, and authenticity, all wrapped up in one irresistible package. He was adventurous. Clark Gable wasn't just a star on the screen, he was a star in life. His love for adventure and living life to the fullest only added to his charm, making him more than just a pretty face or a talented actor. Women adored him not only for his rugged good looks and incredible charisma, but also for his daring, free-spirited nature that made him seem like a man of action, someone who could take on anything life threw his way. He was passionate about adventure and lived for the thrill. Gable was known for his love of the outdoors, especially when it came to activities like hunting, fishing, and even flying. In fact, he had a pilot's license and loved flying planes, something that wasn't very common at the time. His fascination with aviation even led him to serve as a military pilot during World War II, where he flew combat missions. This sense of adventure and his willingness to take risks only added to his appeal. What women loved about Gable was that he wasn't afraid to break the mold. In an era when many stars were expected to maintain a perfect, well-groomed image, he was often seen getting dirty, having fun, and living life on his terms. He was the type to get involved in rugged activities that showcased his real-life masculinity and confidence. But Gable wasn't just about rough-and-tumble outdoor adventures. He also knew how to let loose and have fun in his personal life. He was often seen at the races, hanging out with friends, or partying in Hollywood's hot spots. Whether he was on a horse, behind the wheel of a race car, or at a glamorous Hollywood party, he had a way of making everything seem like an adventure. Women loved that he wasn't trapped by the Hollywood lifestyle. He embraced it, but always found a way to make his own path. This sense of adventure didn't just translate to his activities, it was evident in his approach to relationships too. Gable had multiple high-profile relationships and marriages, each filled with its own drama, excitement, and unpredictability. He lived with an openness to love and loss, and women admired the fact that he could love passionately, learn from heartbreak, and keep moving forward. There was something undeniably attractive about a man who wasn't afraid to take risks and embrace new experiences. Clark Gable didn't just sit on the sidelines of life, he was right in the thick of it, living fully, embracing challenges, and never backing down from a new adventure. His zest for life made him all the more captivating, and women loved him for it. Strong and silent. Gable's appeal was amplified by his strong, silent type persona. He was a man of few words, but when he spoke, it was impactful. This air of mystery and quiet confidence made him all the more intriguing to women. In a world of flashy movie stars and over-the-top personalities, Gable stood out by simply being himself, cool, composed, and never needing to shout for attention. The strong, silent approach didn't mean Gable lacked depth or emotion. In fact, it was quite the opposite. He played characters who were stoic and measured in their actions, but who had emotional complexity just below the surface. Take his iconic role as Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind. He was a man who didn't spill his feelings every second. But when he did, it was in a way that commanded respect. His heart was in everything he did, even when he didn't say a word. This quality was incredibly attractive because it suggested that he had control over his emotions, yet still had a vulnerable side that was only revealed in moments of intense need. It made him appear mysterious, like there was always more to uncover, and women loved the idea of discovering that hidden side. Gable's characters didn't need to be flashy or overly expressive to convey their emotions. His eyes, his posture, and the way he held himself were enough. On top of that, there was something inherently masculine about Gable's strong, silent presence. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and hold it together without needing to dominate the conversation. His presence was commanding in the subtlest way, which made women want to be around him even more. There was power in restraint, and Gable knew how to use that power to his advantage. Even off-screen, Gable wasn't one to reveal too much about his personal life, which added to his mystique. His relationships, his true thoughts, and his feelings were often kept behind the scenes, and the media often speculated about the details of his life. This created an allure around him. He was always just out of reach, and that made women even more interested in him. He was compassionate and loyal. Wasn't just a ladies' man or a Hollywood heartthrob. He was also known for his deep compassion and loyalty to the people he loved. Women were drawn to his big-hearted nature, which was often hidden behind his tough exterior. While he had the rugged masculinity that made him stand out on screen, he also had a caring side that made him even more endearing. Gable's love for his family and friends was well known in Hollywood. He was especially close to his wives, particularly Carole Lombard, whom he was deeply devoted to. Their relationship was one of the most genuine and affectionate in Hollywood history, and Gable's grief after her tragic death in a plane crash revealed just how much she meant to him. His loyalty to Lombard and the way he cared for her was something that women admired. He wasn't just with her because of her beauty or her fame, but because he genuinely loved her. Beyond his romantic relationships, Gable was also known for his loyalty to his friends and colleagues. He would go out of his way to help those in need, whether it was offering support during tough times or simply being there when someone needed a friend. His kindness extended to people in Hollywood who weren't as famous as him, and he made sure to treat everyone with respect, from the biggest stars to the crew members on set. He wasn't just the strong, silent type. He was also someone who understood the importance of loyalty and standing by the people he cared about. His relationships were always marked by deep commitment and support. This sense of loyalty was something that women admired because it showed that he was more than just a charming face or a talented actor. He was someone who valued real connections and made an effort to nurture them.